My first question to my clients who walk in with a breakup, how do you feel about yourself? And the usual answer is that I feel horrible. I feel like there's something wrong with me. I don't feel pretty enough. I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel intelligent enough. I don't feel athletic enough. Whatever my partner wanted, I think that I'm not enough.
Pour the Heart Out. Episode 2, Breakups.
Hello everyone. Hi. Welcome to the second episode of Pour the Heart Out. I once again have with me Praneet Kaur, and today we're going to talk about something that affects all of us on a very, very personal level. Probably the most difficult thing that a lot of us have to go through. We're talking about breakups. So, hi Praneet. Welcome to the show. So, first things first, Praneet. I want to understand from you, why are breakups so difficult? I mean, it just goes without a doubt. People have so many emotions. They could be happy, they can be sad, but there is just an extreme amount of emotion that we all have. So why does that happen? Why is it so difficult to deal with it?
So, it's always difficult to deal with sense of loss. Grief is one of the most difficult emotions to deal with. And it just gets a lot more harder when it's about romantic relationships, because with your partner you see that there is a sense of self that gets attached to your partner, and who you are, this entity sort of expands to another person, and your sense of self gets extended. And now, when you talk about who you are, when you define yourself, your roles in life, your interests, all of this, when you do that, you factor in what your partner has to say. You factor in your partner's likes and dislikes, their interests. Both of you start to merge breakup, but there's one thing which is there in almost all the relationships, all the breakups by and large. Then it is this sense of feeling empty, or feeling this crazy void that just feels like never ending. It feels like we'll just never be able to come out of this pit, and I'm just sort of trying to get out of this trench, and I just won't be able to make it because it just feels so hollow suddenly. And that happens when you really lose a part of yourself, a part of who you are. So, it's not really just about the habits. Like, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to call my partner, and he or she is going to be the first person that I call when I have something really amazing to share, or when I'm really sad. But it also is about how they've made you feel. How you felt your own presence in their company. So there's something that changes about how you feel about yourself, how you start to look at yourself in the mirror, how you start to evaluate yourself. Your evaluation of yourself changes, your your eye towards yourself changes. So you feel that I no longer am the same. So it's not just the loss of your partner, it's also a loss of who you really were when you were with them. And it really feels like who I was with my partner, I've lost that, and I can't bring that part back. If we were the fun couple, I don't know how to do fun things anymore. If we were the vulnerable couple, I don't know who else to be vulnerable to. It seems like a loss of meaning, if I have to conclude it. And we humans, we form connection based on this meaning. We essentially connect because of this meaning. We're always looking for meaning. So with this partner going away, there's a massive loss of meaning, of who you are, of your sense of self. And that's why the emotions are they're so varied and they're so intense, and it's almost like I've lost an arm. I'm so used to working with this arm. I'm so used to having the weight divided, in between these two arms. I mean, both of these arms work together, and suddenly I wake up with no arm, you know. And I mean, I can tell myself as many positive messages as I can. There can be all these other body parts supporting and trying to compensate, but I've lost this arm and it's not going to come back. And it's heartbreaking. And there's nothing that you can do but to grieve about it. There's nothing that you can do to bring it back, because it's gone. It takes away that meaning, that evaluate how I'd evaluate myself. I no longer feel normal. I no longer feel whole, happy. I feel constantly that something is missing. I constantly feel there's a void. That's why breakups are so hard.
Now that you say that, Nate, I was also thinking that what really happens to the person's sense of self, now that the part of it is gone. what happens to the remaining bit?
Right. Good question. It's same as, how would the rest of your body feel if your arm is gone? You know, ideally, nothing is going to happen. Nothing's going to change in the rest of your body, in the sense that all the other body parts are intact and everything's all right. But emotionally and psychologically, you're going to lose it, and you're going to feel this constant amiss, that something is not here. Something that used to be here is just it's not here anymore. And also, you're going to try to compensate with the remaining arm, and this arm is always going to be tired and exhausted. And that is what happens to your sense of self. When that person is gone, everything else starts to feel like a burden, because you perceive your relationship as, like I said, as someone always who was always there, who always shared everything with you, who you always shared everything with. And now it just feels like I'm alone. I'm just all by myself in my life. I have to go through all my happy moments alone, all my sad moments alone. And suddenly sad is just a lot more sadder, and happiness is not as happy. Because um, whatever you were sharing it with, you earlier had two arms to deal with that kind of baggage. Now you have just one. And you can't help but constantly feel that loss. And how does that affect your sense of self? Is that you start to devalue it. When you attach your sense of self to something, when you start to evaluate yourself in a higher regard because of a factor, and then that factor is taken away from you, you start to devalue yourself. You start to look at all the things that are possibly wrong with you. That is what rejection does to you. That is what abandonment does to you. It starts to make you feel that there's everything wrong with you, and because there's so much that's wrong with you, this person has left you. It makes you sit down, calculate, if only I had done this differently, if only I wasn't this way, if only this, that, all the what ifs come into the picture, and you start to take too much responsibility for what has happened. This comes from a place where humans are always going after certainty. We always need answers. We cannot deal with not having answers. We cannot deal with not knowing what really went wrong. We need to know. We either end up putting the blame on the partner, or we start internalizing the blame, or we do both of these things one after the other. There are phases where we're blaming them and we're just utterly angry, and then there are days where we're really guilty and ashamed of what we've done and how we've ruined the relationship. And this back and forth leads to a lot of damage of your sense of self. You just constantly start asking yourself. I mean, my first question to my clients who walk in with a breakup problem is that, how do you feel about yourself? And the usual answer is that I feel horrible. I feel like there's something wrong with me. I don't feel pretty enough. I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel intelligent enough. I don't feel athletic enough. Whatever my partner wanted, I think that I'm not enough. And all these feelings that, by the way, are not fresh. You have felt this in the past, and we'll get to that in a bit. Because you felt this in the past, and now you've broken up with your partner, all these feelings are coming rushing back. They're all resurfacing, and they're all making you just question yourself in a way that it starts to haunt you. And that's why you just really want to then start to run away from yourself after a breakup. You cannot be with yourself in the same room with yourself. You need something. You need to engage yourself in some kind of noise, in some kind of numbing behaviors, in order to not deal with this constant heavy feeling and this void and this feeling that there's something very, very wrong with you.
And Praneet, do you think that, filling yourself of that void, I mean, just trying to get some noise in, trying to do anything, maybe surround yourself with people, take more work, is that really like a healthy way to cope with everything that's happening?
So if you ask me, to cope means to just deal with it for now, to rise from the situation that you're in for now. So coping, yes, it may work for you. Recover, not really. Because in order to recover from something that you're feeling, you need to sit with it. You need to make room for it, and you need to have capacity to deal with that kind of emotion. If you don't, and if you're engaging in numbing behavior, what you're necessarily doing is that you're shutting yourself down, And the thing with this with emotions is that they're not like those paper balls that you can just crush and throw in your garbage, and then garbage will be taken out, and then you're free. That's not how emotions work. Emotions, they stay with you, they grow in you, and if they're not attended to, the process that you undergo to manage these emotions, it gets prolonged. So that's the thing with emotions. You put them away, they grow. You look at them, you sit with them, you water the ones that are helpful, and you manage the ones that are coming in your way in any way. But if you're not looking at those emotions, that's what happens, that your emotions grow when you're on autopilot. Your unresolved emotions, you don't realize, but you end up watering them when you're not aware of what you're really doing with them. So your emotional troubles grow when you're unconscious. And when you're conscious, you start to dissolve those emotions, you start to resolve them. So coping, yes. Recovering, for sure, no.
Okay. And now when I'm hearing you talk, I also feel that, a major part of recovery, like you said, you have to look at what you're feeling, then you have to really feel it, then you have to talk about it. And then there are, of course, so many things that you need to do. Now, when we talk about looking at what situation we are in, that also means acknowledging your feelings, right? So again, like so many people have so many different ways. They feel so many different things after a breakup. Some of them are extremely sad, some of them are extremely angry, some don't feel a thing. So how does one really hear what they're feeling? Because a lot of times what also happens is that outwardly you're angry, but internally you're also frustrated. You're also, so many other things. So how do you really understand what you're feeling about whatever has just happened?
Right. So, like you said, that there's a wide range of emotions that you go through. And the first step towards healing those emotions and working through your breakup is to start to recognize what you're feeling. And to recognize is to just dive in that chaos that just seems too chaotic. You have no idea where the threads are. It's just a whole noodle of those threads, and you don't know where the starting point is, where the end point is. It's just a whole really bad mix up. But that's the idea, that you have to get your hands dirty when it comes to doing the emotional work. You have to get down to the problem. You have to sit with those heavy, overwhelming feelings and just talk to yourself. you know you know how when your friend comes to you and they're like, I'm just feeling very off today. What do? We go like, oh yeah, why, what happened? I mean, I've heard so many people do this. Their friend goes like, yeah, no, I'm not really sure, and the friend says, you always know, why are you feeling off? Come on, you do know. Tell me, when did it start? And then they're like, yeah, no, I'm not sure. Okay, tell me, what happened? Why? I just woke up in the morning and I was feeling off. Okay, what was happening? Nothing. I was just lying down, woke up late. I was worried that I'm going to miss college, so that made me a little off. Oh, and yeah, now I know, my ex messaged, and then this happened, and yada yada yada, and then what happened. So you do it with your friends, with your family all the time. You know how to track back and understand where your triggers are, and how to deal with things. You're giving out these advices all the time to your friends. I see people sitting with their friends and telling them so many times that, yeah, of course, it's going to be hard, and then, I mean, don't worry, we're here for you, we'll get over it. But we're just terribly scared of doing this to ourselves. We don't want to be here for us while we're feeling sad. We don't want to do that. We just want to go out, get a drink, smoke a cigarette, binge watch, binge eat, just engaging anything that's distractive, but to sit with our emotions. But it's really just about sitting with them, where everything will start with chaos. Yes, you won't sit with your emotions on day one and suddenly you'll start feeling this relief. No, it's about addressing the elephant in the room. It's about feeling that anxiety. It's about seeing how your heart pounds and your hands shiver and you sweat and you tremble and you just really feel the need to call them back. And it's about allowing yourself to feel it while you be there with yourself, with both your feet on the ground, hands on the knees, asking yourself, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Where am I feeling this anxiety? Do I feel it in my hands? Are my neck muscles getting tight? Are my shoulders getting tight? Does my head hurt? Do I want water right now? Do I want to just go out, for some air? Do I feel suffocated right now? It's about getting in touch with what and how your body reacts when you feel a certain emotion. That's what we do to our friends. If we see them gasping for air, we tell them, come, we'll go out for a walk. Hey, are you all right? Give them some tissues. Then we'll give them water, and we'll just sit with them when they're crying. And that's exactly the kind of treatment we need and deserve. And that's what we need to do. That is what sitting with your emotions look like. In the beginning, it's going to just be this really dark cloud where you won't know what's happening, very hazy, very blurry. And as in how you start to become comfortable with sitting with that, comfortable with discomfort, you will start to navigate through that. You will start to realize, oh, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm feeling. There's a tool that I give out to my clients. It's very easily available on Google as well. You can look up feeling wheel. It's called feeling wheel. It's a wheel, various concentric circles in which there's a whole list of emotions mentioned. So it begins with 6 core emotions, and then those core emotions are further demarcated. There's segments. Like, for example, it begins with sadness. So there's loneliness and abandonment and all of that in the spectrum of sadness. So I often ask my clients to go through the feeling wheel. First, sit with your emotions, pull out the feeling wheel, and see which emotion on this feeling wheel does the most justice to how I'm feeling right now. And just name your emotion, because we only end up saying those 3-4 words that we know. We don't have vocabulary for our emotions. We end up saying, yeah, I feel good, I feel bad, I feel nice, I feel horrible. None of these are emotions. Good, bad, nice is not an emotion. Sad, abandoned, disapproved, lonely, unworthy, these are emotions. Disgust, shame, you know. And it begins with first recognizing what your emotion is, and then you will navigate through the rest of the process. Begins with first naming it.
Right. And again, I'm sure that anybody who does this, it's again a very, very difficult space to be in. So, what do you like to anyone hearing this, anyone who's planning to do this, any word of advice, anything that you'd like to tell them that, if you're suddenly feeling overwhelmed once you do this, what is it that you recommend them?
If you go in it and you're feeling too overwhelmed, that's all right. Leave it right there. Step back. Come right out. But do so very consciously. Like we discussed in our first episode also, let consciousness be your constant companion. If you're feeling just too overwhelmed today, you don't need to push yourself through this process. You're already suffering. Kindness is what we need. We don't want to push ourselves and just be like, I'm going to just move on and sit on this, rocket and just going to go to the happy land. No, we don't want to do that. We want to be very slow and steady in this process, and we want to be continuously kind to ourselves while we're doing it. So the idea is that if you walk into it, you feel too overwhelmed, you step right out. That's all right. But do so very consciously. Okay, I'm just feeling too overwhelmed today. I just want to switch off. So I'm binge watching right now because I want to switch off. Because when you won't be on autopilot, when you'll be conscious that that's why I'm doing it, you would be willing to come back to it later on. You won't be lying to yourself, and you won't walk into a next new relationship with the same baggage, because you're aware that there's something that's unresolved here. And even though right now I'm not ready to do it, I am willing to, I need to, and I want to come back to it when I'm slightly more ready. And you will be more ready. The overwhelmingness will eventually come down as in how you keep becoming aware of it. So if you are sitting with your emotions and if it feels too crazy to handle, that's all right. Give that friend a call. Do whatever works for you. Just distract yourself if that's what you want. But do not lie to yourself while you do that. Be honest. Tell yourself that I don't think I can handle this right now. I'm going to come back. And once you're done with whatever it is that you did to cope, journal. You know, sit down and journal about it. Or some of my clients are like, journaling doesn't work for us. I tell them to just talk out loud and have your phone's recorder on. and record yourself and then hear yourself at a later point. My one of my clients has very beautifully recorded her entire like breakup journey, and she wants to like compile it because she says that this also was a way that I could record my progress, and I see how I've come so far. And now when I listen to the, she calls it episodes, she's like, when I listen to the first episode of my breakup podcast, I just feel so liberated. I feel that I've come so far, and I feel I have evidence for the progress that I've made. So journal and write or record, and talk to yourself about what was I feeling, what happened when I was getting into that, what stopped me, and then what did I do to distract myself, and can I try this again? Can I sit with my emotions again? But it just seems like such a bizarre concept when you start talking about it, that I always get this question in my workshops and trainings, that but it's just too much work, you know why would we do it? Why won't we just sleep on it? Sleeping makes it better. Like, who's doing that, ma'am? Who's sitting with their emotions to get over the breakup? Everyone is just sleeping on it or drinking on it or shopping on it. What are you talking? But then everyone is also having failed relationships, but then everyone is also asking me the questions that, why am I choosing the same kind of partners? Why am I always the one who's getting hurt or his heartbroken? Why is it that people always leave me? Why is it that I always end up lonely? Why is it that I always feel that this time it's going to work out, but it ends up not working out? It's because we're bringing the same baggage onto the next person also. It's because moving on has become moving on to someone else. And that's why we're just carrying the same baggage, the same emotions, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. We've seen it with some of our parents who chose each other, who got into who loved each other, and then they got into a wedlock, and we see how their marriages are today. It can go that far. And you, being their children, are troubled by their marriage today. And you're making the same mistakes in your relationship. So it really is transgenerational. It's not just trans relationships where you're going from one relationship to the other making the same mistakes, but you're going generations to generations making the same mistakes, because that's how relationships work. We model, caregivers in families model relationships, model how you act in relationships, and then you learn the same thing, and then you do the same thing with your partner, and then you're going to pass it on. So it's just, the cycle's just never going to break. So in your relationships, when you do not do the emotional work, you're not just suffering in your relationships to come, like the relationship after that, or the final one, the one. The saddest part is that your unhealthy, toxic relationships impact you in ways that you carry that baggage onto the good ones, into the relationships that are there to stay, that are there to work for you. And a lot of times we discuss this in sessions with a lot of my clients, that because you've been cheated upon in the past, now even if you've found a trusted partner, you're going to push them away because you're just so scared of being cheated upon again. You're just always waiting for another hat to drop again, because you've not done your emotional work. So you're just going to carry the baggage forward into your next relationship and into the next generation as well. So it's happening on two levels. It's happening on an individual level and on a societal level, on the structural level as well. This is how important it is to do the emotional work, to do the real original pain work.
Right. And I think just it's what you said is also super relevant on why it's definitely important. But at the same time, it's important to know that the idea is not to just go on right away, just to take small steps and just get there eventually, right? So yeah, I mean, whoever's listening to this, do this, but also take your time with it. And yeah, moving on. So Praneet, one of the things that you mentioned right now is that, we as humans, we need answers. That kind of leads me to a question of closure. This is such an overused word, if I may say, with breakups, right? Everybody's running after closure, which I understand is a natural instinct, but some people don't end up getting it. So, I want to understand from you, how important is that closure? B, what when that closure is missing and you know that you're not going to get?
I really think that closure is a myth. I think it's just a really popular term that we picked up. And, when you're going through a breakup, there's something that you want to hold on to, and to have that illusion of hope, or okay, this, if I get this, it's like a pill, I'm going to swallow it, and I'm going to feel better. But let's go through this and let's try to understand what the journey of a person who's just gotten out of a relationship is like. You've gotten out of a relationship, like we discussed, there is a sense of loss, you're grieving, you're angry, you're still trying to navigate what happened, or you're still in shock, or you're in denial. There is a massive loss of sense of self, loss of meaning. There is this huge void that you're experiencing. Now, the question is, how is any of this going to get better by just having that last call with your partner? The truth is that the partner's gone, the arm is gone. So knowing why your arm got cut, that, oh, you were doing some seva for the society, something for a good cause and it got cut, is not going to make me miss this arm any less. It's not going to reduce the pain, and it's not going to make healing any better. The illusion is that healing has something to do with the other person, but it's just so personal a process. It's really just about your emotions and how you navigate through them. It's about how losing a person makes you feel about yourself. How does it impact your life? How does it impact the way you evaluate yourself? And even though you hear from that person, I mean, so many times it happens, people go after closure, they want to have that one last conversation with the partner, or they want to know why they broke up with this person. They find out, and no answer is good enough. We're not convinced with any answer. If we get an answer, we question it, we don't believe it. And if we believe it, then there's a whole next level of calculation that begins from there on. So whatever answers you're getting, it's all intellectual. These are intellectual answers to what happened. But the healing, the suffering is not happening on an intellectual level. The suffering is happening on an emotional level. So healing also needs to be happening on an emotional level. And knowing answers does not change how you feel. You see, emotions are not about the present moment, it's about who you are, it's about where you're coming from. So, someone who's been rejected repeatedly in life, or who's seen abandonment in childhood, who's seen rejection from caregivers in the childhood, that person is going to have such difficulty dealing with rejection compared to the person who's not seen rejection in that light, who's not suffered because of it in that manner. It's going to be a whole other story for them. No matter what their breakup stories are, no matter if they broke up or their partners did, no matter if there was infidelity involved or heartbreaks involved, it really is about where you're coming from. And we always miss out on this part. We think that if only my partner tells me more that they love me, if only they would have just made me feel more special, if only I would have done this, things would have been different now. I would have felt different now. If only my partner calls up and tells me that I miss you, I'm going to feel more reassured and getting over them is going to be easy. That's not true. Because the truth is that our emotions have nothing to do with the validation that we get. It just temporarily makes us feel better, coping like we discussed, but it doesn't help you recover. Because recovery is, where is that need for validation coming from? Why is it that every time that I get it, I feel good temporarily, but I go back to evaluate myself in a very, very low regard? Now, how I perpetually feel about myself is how I'm going to respond to this breakup, and not how I feel about myself temporarily when my partner talks to me after breaking up. So I really think that closure is a myth. It's just something that we want to hold on to in order to reach a point where we can sort of put it on the other person, not take responsibility and say that if only I know this, then I'm going to start to heal. Then I'm going to be able to move on from it. It's just, again, not taking responsibility and attributing how you're feeling to external factors.
So, Praneeth, you mentioned healing as a term a couple of times, and I really want to understand what is it that we mean when we say healing? Because again, similarly, how relationship goals are very subjective to everybody. What are some post-relationship or moving on goals that people should have, and what is it that healing? I mean, what is healing actually going to feel like? Is it going to be complete detachment? Is it going to be detachment from a particular emotion? So, what is it that healing is actually going to feel like?
Right. So, a lot of times people confuse healing with just not thinking about your partner anymore, or just completely erasing them from your memory. But the thing is that healing is not absence of emotions towards this person who once was so important for you. Healing is that you have these emotions, you are able to sit with these emotions, and these emotions are not taking over, or you're not so scared of them that you're then going on autopilot and you're numbing and you're switching off, and then you're carrying that baggage onto your next relationship. So some of the goals of for healing after a breakup could be that you heal from everything that this breakup led you feeling. For example, after breaking up with this person, you're constantly questioning, who you are and if you're worth it. If you deserve love, because they pointed out everything that you did uh, that led to this breakup. Or maybe this breakup led to body shaming because you were told by your partner that, you were in a very intimate setup with your partner, and that's when they talk to you about your flaws. If only this was slightly better, you would be smarter, hotter, prettier. Or you were perhaps told by your partner that, you're too much drama, you're too sensitive, or who cries like this? Are you a little girl who cries like this? All these things, what is it that you've been told by your partner? What is it that you picked up in this relationship? What were already your triggers, and they just further got triggered, and now you're very sensitive about a few things about yourself. There are certain parts of yourself that you cannot look at after coming out of this relationship. It has led to certain kind of shame and disgust, and now you're going into the next relationship with these feelings of shame and disgust. Now when you walk into this new relationship with those same feelings, with those same insecurities, would be a better word, you are always, like I said, waiting for another hat to drop. You're always waiting for, again, something to go wrong. So if, for example, you've been told by your partner that you're too much. I don't like it when you do it. When you laugh so loudly, when you talk so loudly, or you're just always crying, or why are you so vocal about your feelings? You shouldn't be talking about everything. A lot of people are shamed for being vulnerable. And now you're walking into the next relationship where your partner tells you, on one fine day, that I don't think I'm really up for a heavy discussion. Can we like tone it down today? Can we talk about something lighter? And it might just trigger you. It might take you back to when your ex used to tell you that you're too dramatic, that you're too much, you're always crying, you're feeling too much. It might not be the same case, but you might just start connecting it to that and start feeling triggered. And you won't even know where it got connected. And before you know it, you will start attacking your partner. And that'll lead to a fight, and he won't know or she won't know what happened, and you won't know what happened. And before you know it, you are in a fight which is just unexplainable. And if this happens more than one time, then you are the one who's pushing your partner away, and your partner started to now feel that, oh, he or she is just very unreasonable. I don't understand, why is this happening? And if you're not aware as to why is this happening, you're going to continue to repeat this pattern, and this is going to continue to happen. And this partner is also going to then end up saying that you're too much. Maybe earlier you were shamed, but now it's called self-fulfilling prophecy. What you thought might go wrong will end up going wrong. Murphy's law, right? So this is what happens when you're not healing. So one of the goals of healing is that every trigger that I got from this relationship should be healed from the very core. I shouldn't walk into a new relationship with triggers, with insecurities, with those sensitivities that make me just completely flip out if I'm attacked. You know, another goal can be that I want to be able to be in a better place with myself. Like if insecurities are missing, then what is there? We know the do nots, but what are the do's? So equipping yourself with understanding what does a healthy relationship look like. So this includes learning how to communicate. How do I tell my partner? How do I put forth a disagreement? How do I talk about my expectations? Equipping yourself with those kind of things. Look at those couples around you who are modeling healthy relationship behaviors. So when your caregivers are always fighting in front of you, you only have unhealthy relationships that you've seen, or only unhealthy ways of communicating. So you need to find new models for yourself, new reference points for yourself. And somehow we always think that if you found the right person, that's it, job done. Now, this will somehow automatically work on its own, but that's not true. You're going to have to teach yourself how to work out this relationship, how to be in a place where you're not just not doing the wrong things, but also doing the right things. If you're not screwing it up, and if you're not bringing in toxicity, then you should also be able to bring in health and growth and thriving together, and growing together, and how to deepen that connection that you all share. It's not about just clicking once and job done. That's not how it works. You need to maintain that, and somehow it's not taught to us in our culture. So I think healing would look like taking care of the damage done and then rebuilding on new foundations.
Right, that makes sense. And I think before we move on to some questions that our community has sent us, one thing I'd really like to know from you is, and this is a trend that a lot of people follow, that once they break up, they just cut all ties, which includes blocking them everywhere, blocking it from Instagram, blocking from WhatsApp, and just like basically ensuring that there's no way that the other person can reach out to you or you reach out to them. So I want to understand from you that, is this really a healthy practice, or do you think this is going to in any way hamper that healing process that we're talking about?
See, we need to understand that when someone is so dear to us, and now that they're suddenly not in the picture, we're going to have to learn how to make peace with this new equation. And because the dynamic has now changed, there's going to be the need to build boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, you're going to keep bouncing back, which we see where it's a very prominent trend. I mean, so this is another relationship status. What kind of relationship are you in? It's not complicated anymore. It's on and off now. Where you're getting together and you're breaking up, and it's a trend. And you ask these couples, how long have you been together for, and they have big numbers to quote: 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. But if you really calculate really how long have they been, and they've dated other people here and there, in between, in this whole phase, because they were on a break, the whole Ross and Rachel culture. And there are so many breaks that are happening because we're not building those boundaries. Right? So the thing is that it's really about making boundaries. It's really about being able to be in a place where you're not reconciling when you know that it's not going to work, where you're not going back to the partner who you know is not healthy for you, even though you really want to, even though you may really miss them. And understanding that in the initial phase of it, you're going to be vulnerable. So you're going to have to establish boundaries to make sure that you stick to your decision. You know, now this boundary making is something that has to be practiced very consciously. It's only when you build that boundary is when you are able to then find yourself in a new equation. Okay, how do I want to relate to this person now? Now, this boundary can be different for different people. Coming to your question, is it healthy to block your partner from everywhere and all of that? Well, I think it's different for different couples and for both the individuals in a relationship. Perhaps one partner is capable of being friends and still maintaining boundaries, but the other partner finds it really difficult to do that. For one partner, if they even look at you again, they're just going to, like go back to the same cycle. Whereas the other partner is perfectly all right staying in touch and also seeing other people. Maybe both of them are saying that, okay, let's just move on to other people, but one of them doesn't really mean it. So it's really about, each one to its own. If you as an individual feel that it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. Then you are going to have to distance yourself. But if you feel that, yeah, I can work this out, I can talk to them, I know how to maintain these boundaries, I can be friends with them and still continue to stick to my decision that this person is not healthy for me. So a lot of couples are able to work out being friends after a breakup, and a lot of them, it's the biggest for a lot of them, it's the biggest mistake of their relationship, where the moment they become friends, they meet at a party, they are they hooked up because they were too drunk, and now they're having the conversation, and there you go, before you know it, they're together. And now there's going to be a restart of honeymoon phase. So for the initial weeks it's going to be great, and you'll be like, oh, now he or she is a changed person, it's just really so much better now, but then again the honeymoon phase is going to fade out, and the same problems will come in, and you will realize that it's nothing has changed, it's the same. And then the most bizarre belief system comes in. When this keeps happening, you start telling yourself or your partner, but look, we always end up coming back together. Doesn't this mean something? We're meant to be together, and if we're always managing to find a way back to each other, it means that we are the one for each other. Well, no, it means that you have really poor boundaries. It means that you understand that this relationship is unhealthy, and because of these boundaries that you're continuously trespassing, you're coming back together. It's not love, it's emotional addiction. And emotional addiction is that you keep going back to the places that are familiar. When you're in a relationship which is very chaotic, even though it evokes a lot of unpleasant feelings, those unpleasant feelings you're familiar to. What it does to your neurons, what it does to your body, that feeling, that sort of a that chaos that you experience, that turmoil that you're experiencing, you're very familiar with it. It has become your comfortable spot, and that's why you keep going back to it. That is what it is. It's an emotional addiction, and this is called trauma bonding. You continue to bond over the trauma that you've seen in the past also. Perhaps you were in a relationship with your parents where you were there was a lot of uncertainty in their behavior. They were very loving at one point, and then they were suddenly very, very aggressive at the other point. And that always made you feel that love is very unpredictable. That maybe your love and fear started to come from the same place, and you always end up choosing partners also with similar pattern because you're familiar with that feeling. And if a person like this ends up finding a partner who only brings them peace and calm, they're just going to get bored very easily. They're just going to start to pull away from that partner, or they're going to start to push away that partner. And this pull and push is also a part of trauma bonding. You're not bonding with this person, you're trauma coupling with them. And it's because of this that you keep coming back to each other, not because it's true love, you know. And so the whole culture of should I block them, should I not? I don't think there is a cookie cutter response to that. I don't think anyone can say for any couple that this is the ideal thing for you to do. It's about understanding what boundaries do I want to make with this person? How do I feel around this person? Is there something else in our relationship? If we take away love, if we take away the romantic side of it, can this relationship offer me something else as well? And whatever it offers, does it also bring health to my life? Genuine health and happiness? Or does it bring more exhaustion or more trauma? And if it does bring more good things to me, then I do want to hold on to it. And then we are going to need to have a conversation about it. And it has to be both the people. It's not It can't be just you. If you're feeling it but the other person's not, you can't be entitled. You can't go like, oh, but I really think it's going to work. Why don't you think it's going to work? Because they don't think, and that's the end of it, you know. So boundary is two things. One, ask yourself, what do I really want to do? Two, ask yourself, are my actions and what I want to do aligned to each other? Are these two things integrated? Third, actually, one more thing. You need to check with your partner or ex partner. You need to see where they're at. And if they are in the same place as you, then you guys can continue being friends or blocking each other out. If they're not, then you are just going to have to deal with your side of the boundary. You're just going to have to make your side of the boundary. You're going to have to see, do you want to entertain their messages or completely block them out of your life?
So now we're going to move on to some questions that our community has sent them, and I'm just going to take a few of them up. So the first question is that it's again in line to what you were just talking about. What to do when an ex comes back after months of breakup?
Ask yourself, do I want them back? When you're at a job and you get a very good opportunity, which is going to give you lots of money and it's going to have you travel around, ask yourself, am I taking this opportunity just because this came my way or because I was genuinely waiting for it? So just because, we always say that if opportunity knocks the door, answer it. Well, you don't always have to answer it. Or you can answer it, you can check out the opportunity. If it works for you, let it come in. And if it doesn't, just close the door.
So the next question says, my partner is not as affected by the breakup at all. How do I deal with this?
So, when you see that your partner is not as affected, how it makes you feel is that, oh, so I wasn't as important to them as they were to me. This leads to a sense of rejection. And this is going to be triggering for, like I said, all those people who've seen rejection growing up, who were rejected by their caretakers, who were rejected by their peers, who were bullied, who were rejected by their siblings. This is going to be very triggering for those people. So, in order to deal with this, again, it's not about asking your partner that why aren't you feeling it? Oh, were you never in love with me? Was it all, a jhoot? But it's really about getting in touch with what is making you so triggered about the fact that they're not troubled as you are. Because if you're trying to get over a relationship, you're trying to move on from a breakup, then it's really about you and your emotions. But what's making you worry about where your partner's at, your ex partner's at? That means that they have that particular behavior has triggered something in you, something that has already been there. So whenever you feel really troubled by such behaviors of your partner, get in touch with what is it about this behavior that's stirring something inside of you.
How to emotionally detach yourself from your partner who you're still in love with?
Yes, so this is the most interesting question that people ask a relationship expert. To this, I have to say that what may sometimes look like love, feel like love, may not be love. A lot of times when we come from a place of, again, like I said, trauma in the childhood, we end up confusing dependency with love, um, addiction, emotional addiction with love. We end up confusing validation with love, and we end up confusing chaos with love. Just because we're familiar with something, just because we're used to it, just because no matter how much health it brings to us or how much chaos it brings to us, we keep going back to it, we keep wanting it, doesn't mean that it's love. It may mean that it is, like I said, coupling over your trauma, because that the emotion of love is different. Like I said, that love, okay, so I read this somewhere and it just really made a lot of sense to me. um, the line said that, love is and can be unconditional, but relationships can't be. There are always going to be conditions and expectations in relationships. And if you're in love with someone but they're not in love with you, then you can continue to have a certain kind of admiration towards them, but it can't ever grow into a relationship, because then you're going to want them to reciprocate. You're going to want them to give you what you expect. Your love for them is not going to be enough for this relationship to work. But if you're in love with a person who's not in love with you and you're trying to get over it, it means there's some kind of an emotional addiction that's there. Because the fundamental of love for humans is that what we're essentially looking for in love is meaning, like I said. It adds meaning to our life when two people connect. But if you're in love and the other person's not, then you're not really connecting, you know. Then what is it that you're giving meaning to? Then what is it that you're creating in your head? Then what kind of fantasy are you holding on to? Is this perhaps something that you were always waiting for? Does this person look like someone that you always wanted? Does this person look like your rescuer? Does this person look like everything you've never had in your family? Or does this person look exactly what you've seen in your family? Do they feel familiar? Do they feel something that you're very, very used to? So anything that is familiar may not always be love. It could just be familiarity. It could just be emotional dependency. It could just be you bonding over what you've already seen in your life a lot. So being in a position where you're in love with this person, but the other person's not, and thinking about moving on, I think what's needed to be done at first is to understand and to get in touch with this feeling of love and to sit with it, that what is really going on here? What is it that you're really feeling? And once you do that, you will find the answer to the moving on bit as well.
Okay. And before we close the show for today, I just have one last question for you. Because, of course, people are here knowing, I mean, wanting to know how to actually get over a breakup. But, like we also discussed, that tools are there. You have to ask yourself, you have to journal. But often, what I really feel is that the place that people suffer, I mean, and the place that people actually get stuck, and why we say that it's very subjective to everyone, is that there is something that stops you from going ahead and just undoing the damage that happened, right? There is something that always holds you back. So how do people understand that, and once they've understood what that is, what do you think the next step should be?
So, yes, you're right. There's always something that's holding us back, and that energy is so strong. Um, and like we discussed, that we as humans are very, very uncomfortable with uncertainty. Mostly because, again, it goes back to our childhood. It's because perhaps we had a lot of it growing up. And as children, you're just not able to deal with uncertainty because children need a lot of structure. That's how they grow. But if they grow up in a household where there was a lot of uncertainty, kabhi bhi kuch bhi ho raha hai, there are parents who have mental health illnesses, there are parents who have chronic, physical illnesses, or there were a lot of violent outbreaks that were happening, you will just develop a lot of anxiety towards uncertainty. Now, because you're so anxious about uncertainty, what's going to happen is that whenever you're going to come even remotely close to something that is not familiar, something that you don't know what it looks like, every time that you'll come close to a sea where you know that you need to dive in to really see what's on the other side, you would just keep standing on the edge and you won't dive in because you need to know standing right here what's on the other side, because that is what your trauma led you to feel. Children who have this kind of trauma in their childhood, they always need to have everything under control. So, my clients are always asking me, ma'am, how do we get over our anxiety? And I just want to stop feeling this. How do I not feel this anymore? And I always tell them that these are two contradictory questions that you're asking me. You can't get over your anxiety and not feel it at the same time. In order to get over your anxiety, you're going to have to sit with it. You're going to have to feel it. You can't heal what you can't feel, you know. So the idea is to make room for that sort of anxiety, to make room for uh, all the emotions that you're going to, go on and feel and just become friends with, The idea is to not be fearful or scared of them anymore, because our emotions are not our enemies. They're our friends. They guide us home. They tell us what works, what doesn't work. A lot of people say things like, I decided I'm not going to talk to this person again, but then I got too emotional and I gave in. No, when we say this, we think that our emotions are our enemies. That's not true. It's not that we got too emotional and that's when we gave in. It's just that we fell into our patterns, the learned patterns. But when we actually become aware and we look at what our emotions are telling us, if there is an emotion of feeling pleasure, that temporary pleasure, there is also an emotion of perhaps fear or anxiety, which is a marker that you're getting into something wrong. And but also a lot of people say, but it feels right, but I know it's not supposed to be like this, but it feels right. So this part that you're calling feeling right is not your emotions, it's your pattern. So being able to demarcate, am I operating out of really my emotions or my pattern, something that is familiar, you know so the idea is to get in touch with whatever your fears are, what stops you from getting in touch with your emotions, and address those fears. Get in touch with those fears, and then make friends with your emotions. Just like move some furniture and welcome anxiety in, and let her sit on your you know couch in your living room and have a conversation with her, and you'll find out that she's not all that scary. I mean, she's actually kind of cool. Your anxiety helps you and you can befriend it, and it doesn't have to overpower you entirely. So, I mean, emotions are not very scary. We're just going to have to change the narrative around it, and to change the narrative around it, we're going to have to sit and have a dialogue with our emotions.
Right. And with that, we come to a close for today's show. And I think we discussed so many things today. Takebacks that I am having personally include things like, emotions are a friend. And perhaps the first step towards that healing is sitting down with yourself, talking, just being curious with your thoughts the way you are with a friend. And from there, just also making sure that you're taking these small steps and also deciding what healing will look like for you. And yeah, thank you so much, Puneet, for doing this again with us. And I hope everybody who's listening this, you found something to take back yourself. And yeah, we'll see you next week on another episode with another concern. Till then, keep pouring your heart out.